14-year-old 4-H girl rescued kidnapped biker's grandson. What 177 Hell's Angels did next. They found the boy alive, but that wasn't the miracle. The miracle was who stood between him and the dark. A 14-year-old girl. A promise whispered in fear, and the roar of 177 engines that came not for revenge, but for love. Thursday afternoons in rural Kentucky moved slowly. Time didn't rush here. It wandered. 14-year-old Hannah Cole walked the gravel road beside the fairgrounds with her 4-H jacket tied around her waist, dust clinging to her boots. The sun leaned low, painting the fields gold. She'd just finished checking the rabbits, making sure water bottles were full, bedding clean, logs written neat. Her leader always said, "Care shows in the small things." Hannah believed that. She believed it when her mother didn't come home some nights, when her dad worked 2 jobs and still smiled like everything was fine, when animals depended on her hands because no one else would show up. That was why she noticed the bike first. A tiny blue BMX lay tipped in the weeds near the tree line, one wheel still spinning. No kid in sight, no helmet, no laughter echoing back. Hannah stopped walking. Most people would have kept going. Kids ditch bikes all the time, but something felt off. The air was too quiet. The cicadas had gone still. She stepped closer and saw the scrape marks. Long, uneven, dragged, her chest tightened. Then she saw it caught on a thorn bush like it had been torn away in a hurry. A small hoodie. Red, the kind sold at county fairs. Inside the pocket, a laminated card. Ethan Price. Severe asthma. Emergency inhaler required. Hannah swallowed hard. She knew the name. Everyone did. Ethan was the quiet 6-year-old who stayed close to his grandpa at events. The old biker with silver hair and eyes that softened every time the boy laughed. People whispered about the man. Hell's Angels. Danger. Trouble. But Hannah had only ever seen a grandfather tying tiny sneakers and holding juice boxes. The phone had 1 bar, then none. She didn't scream, she didn't panic. She took photos, marked the ground, slipped the card into her pocket like it mattered, because it did. And then, heart-pounding, Hannah followed the trail into the trees, because someone had taken a child, and she was the only one who noticed. The trail led downhill, away from the fairgrounds, toward the old limestone pits everyone avoided. Trees closed in. Light thinned. Hannah moved slow, careful, every step deliberate, like she was approaching a scared animal. Her 4-H training whispered in her head, "Don't rush, don't spook, observe first." That's when she heard it. Crying, not loud, not calling out, just the broken sound of someone trying not to be heard. She crouched behind a fallen log and saw the shed, rusted tin walls, one door hanging crooked, a pickup parked crooked beside it, engine still warm. Inside, shadows moved. A man's voice, sharp, angry, another voice begging, small, wheezing. Hannah pressed her hand to her mouth. Through a crack in the wall she saw him, Ethan, wrists tied, knees pulled to his chest, his breathing shallow and fast, panic riding every breath. The man towered over him, pacing, phone to his ear. "She's not getting him back," the man said. "Deal's already done, crossing tonight." Hannah's stomach dropped. Her radio crackled uselessly, out of range. No signal, no help. She checked her backpack. Rope, first aid kit, emergency glucose, 2 asthma inhalers, not prescription but sometimes enough to buy time. Her watch read **6:41 p.m. She knew asthma attacks. Her cousin had them. She knew fear made them worse. She knew a child alone could spiral fast. The man stepped outside to smoke. Hannah didn't think. She moved. She crawled to the back of the shed and whispered through a gap, "Ethan." His eyes snapped up. Terror, hope. "I'm Hannah," she breathed. "I'm here." He shook, couldn't speak. She slid an inhaler through the crack. "Slow breaths, I'll count." She counted with him. 1, 2, 3. His breathing eased just enough to survive another minute. Footsteps returned. Hannah retreated into the brush, heart slamming. She pulled out her notebook and wrote with shaking hands, "Child kidnapped. Old Quarry shed, armed male, crossing tonight, I'm staying." She tucked the note under a rock. If this went wrong, someone needed to know she tried, and if it didn't, everything was about to change. The man came back inside angry. Phone call hadn't gone his way. Hannah watched from the shadows as he grabbed Ethan's chin, forcing eye contact. "You cry again, and I make it worse." Ethan's lip trembled. He nodded fast. Too fast. Something broke inside Hannah. She didn't scream, she didn't rush, she waited. When the man stepped out again to check the truck, Hannah slid back to the wall. whispered low, calm, like she'd practiced with scared animals. "Ethan, listen to me." His eyes found her. "I need you to do something brave," she said. "When I say your grandpa's name, you breathe slow. Can you do that?" He nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. "What's his name?" she asked softly, even though she already knew. "Jack," he whispered. Hannah swallowed. She stood, stepped into the doorway, hands visible, heart racing so hard she thought she might pass out. When the man turned, she didn't flinch. "My name's Hannah," she said, voice shaking but clear. "And that's Jack Price's grandson." The man froze. The air changed. "You don't want to do this," she continued, "because Jack Price doesn't stop looking, and he doesn't forgive people who hurt kids." The man laughed once, nervous, forced. "Go home, girl." Hannah didn't move. "I already left a note," she said. "And I already took pictures, and I already gave him his inhaler, so if you hurt me, it only gets louder." Silence. The man stared at her, calculating. Then sirens echoed in the distance. Faint. Bar, not close enough to help, but close enough to scare. He cursed, shoved past her, ran. Hannah dropped to her knees the second the truck peeled away, hands shaking so bad she could barely untie the rope. Ethan collapsed into her arms, sobbing. She held him, rocked him, whispered, "You're safe, I've got you." But even as police lights finally crested the hill, Hannah knew something else was coming. Because Jack Price would hear about this. And when he did, 177 engines would answer. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and warm plastic. Machines hummed softly. Ethan slept with one hand wrapped around Hannah's finger, breathing steady now. Jack Price stood in the corner. Big man, leather vest folded over his arm, tattoos faded by time, eyes wet, unashamed. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at the girl who hadn't run. Finally, he crossed the room and knelt in front of her. Slowly, carefully, like he didn't want to scare her. "You stayed," he said, voice rough. Hannah nodded. "You didn't have to." "Yes," she said quietly. "I did." Jack bowed his head, pressed his forehead to her hand. Outside, engines began to arrive, one by one, then dozens, then more, not angry, not violent, protective. Bikers lined the street in silence as the sun rose, helmets under arms, heads bowed. 177 men and women who understood one truth: courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's a girl with dirt on her boots who refuses to leave. Jack stood beside Hannah as the sun hit chrome and leather. "You ever need anything," he said, "you call." She smiled small. "Just keep kids safe." He nodded. "Always." And the engines didn't roar. They purred, because this wasn't about fear. It was about respect. By midnight, everyone knew. News moved faster than sirens in a small town. It traveled through text messages, gas stations, hospital waiting rooms, and the low hum of late-night television. A boy taken, a girl who stayed, a biker grandfather whose grandson was almost lost. Lights were still on across Kentucky long after they should have gone dark. At the Cole house, Hannah's father sat at the kitchen table with his hands folded, staring at the dent in the wood where Hannah used to tap her pencil while doing homework. Her mother stood at the sink, gripping the counter like it was the only thing keeping her upright. They hadn't raised a hero. They'd raised a child who noticed. When Hannah finally came home after the hospital released her, she didn't tell the story. She just took a shower and stood under the water until the shaking stopped. Dirt spiraled down the drain. Fear went with it piece by piece. Outside, engines idled, not revving, not loud, just there. Men and women on bikes lined the road like sentinels. No one spoke. They removed helmets as Hannah's father stepped onto the porch, confused and protective all at once. Jack Price dismounted slowly and held up a hand, not in command, but in respect. "She saved my boy," he said simply. "We don't forget that." He handed Hannah's father an envelope. Inside was not money, just a list of phone numbers, names, promises, if she ever needed help, if she ever felt unsafe, if anyone ever tried to take advantage of her bravery. She wouldn't stand alone. When Hannah finally stepped onto the porch, wrapped in an old hoodie, the crowd didn't clap. They nodded. She felt it then, the weight of it, not pride, responsibility. Heroes don't ask to be seen, they ask to be useful. And that night, as engines slowly faded into the dark, Hannah realized something terrifying and beautiful. Her life would never be small again. Ethan didn't remember everything. Trauma has a way of trimming memories down to fragments, sounds without pictures, fear without words. What he remembered most was breathing, how it felt like trying to sip air through a straw. How his chest burned, How panic made it worse. What he remembered clearly was Hannah's voice, counting, slow, steady. At the hospital, doctors said 5 more minutes without that inhaler would have changed everything. They said her timing mattered, her calm mattered, her decision to stay mattered. Hannah sat in the corner while adults spoke around her. Big words, legal words, important words. She focused on Ethan's small hand wrapped around hers. When he woke up fully the next morning, he looked at her and asked one question. "You didn't leave?" She shook her head. "No." He nodded like that answer explained the world. Later, when Jack stepped out to speak to police, Ethan leaned closer and whispered, "I was scared you'd be like the others." Hannah didn't ask who he meant. "I was scared too," she said, "but being scared doesn't mean you go." That afternoon, Hannah walked back to the quarry with officers. She showed them the note, the tracks, the photos, every small thing she'd documented. The sheriff looked at her like he was seeing the future walk backward. "You did our job for us," he said quietly. "No," Hannah replied, "I just didn't leave." Ethan went home. 3 days later, Hannah went back to school. But neither of them were the same, because when a child survives, it's not just because someone was brave, it's because someone chose them. And that choice echoes. People misunderstood the bikes. They thought engines meant anger, noise, violence. But when the Hells Angels returned a week later, it wasn't for intimidation. It was for protection. They rode in slow, respectful, no revving, no spectacle. They parked near the elementary school where Ethan had returned for his first half-day back. Parents tensed, teachers froze. Then Jack removed his vest and folded it over his arm. "We're not here to scare anyone," he said. "We're here to say thank you." They donated new playground equipment, paid for trauma counselors, covered the cost of a new security fence around the school. No banners, no credit taken, just action. Hannah watched from the steps, uncomfortable with attention. Mrs. Lopez from 4-H squeezed her shoulder. "You changed more than one life," she whispered. Hannah shook her head. "I just noticed." Jack heard that, smiled. "World needs more noticers," he said. That night, Hannah added a new line to her journal. "Bravery isn't loud, it's stubborn." She didn't want fame, she didn't want praise. She wanted kids to be safe, and somehow, because of one decision, they were. Weeks passed. Life softened back into routine, but it never fully returned. Hannah still fed animals, still logged temperatures, still walked the same roads. But now, when she passed the quarry, she slowed, she breathed, she remembered. Sometimes Ethan sent drawings, stick figures, bikes, a girl with long hair standing tall. He always colored her jacket green. Hannah kept them folded in her notebook. At the county fair that fall, Jack stood beside Hannah as she showed her 4-H project. He listened like it mattered, because it did. "You ever regret it?" he asked quietly. She thought for a long moment. "No," she said, "I'd regret leaving." Jack nodded, eyes distant. "Most people don't realize," he said, "that the moment you choose to stay, you become something to someone forever." Hannah looked out over the fairgrounds, kids laughing, parents watching, engines parked peacefully at the edge of the lot. She understood then. The world doesn't change because of power. It changes because someone refuses to walk away. And somewhere, a boy breathed easier because a girl listened. Wrists red from rope. Hear Hannah's calm voice cutting through panic like a light in fog. Feel the sharp, crushing truth that his world, his reputation, his strength, his engines had been useless when it mattered most. A child had saved his child. Jack sat alone in his garage most nights, surrounded by chrome and oil and ghosts. Men like him were built to protect. That was the story they told themselves. But protection wasn't muscle or noise. It was presence. He remembered the night his own daughter left. The way fear had driven her farther than anger ever could. He remembered choosing the road over the crib, the club over the quiet. And now, a 14-year-old girl had stood where he once walked away. Jack began to change things quietly. Background checks tightened. Anyone even rumored to cross lines involving kids was out. No votes, no discussions. Donations shifted from image to impact. Shelters, schools, emergency response. The club noticed. No speeches, no announcement, just rules written in ink that didn't fade. When someone asked why, Jack answered the same way every time. "Because I saw what courage actually looks like." Meanwhile, Hannah didn't know any of this. She was busy learning forensics basics after school, volunteering with younger 4-H kids, teaching them how to notice changes in behavior, how to trust instincts without panic. She never said asterisk why. She didn't have to, because sometimes transformation doesn't roar. Sometimes it hums quietly in the background, changing everything without asking permission. The trial came faster than anyone expected. The man was caught 2 counties over trying to cross state lines. Evidence stacked quickly, photos, notes, timelines. Hannah's documentation closed gaps investigators didn't even know existed. She was called to testify. Her hands shook as she sat outside the courtroom, feet not touching the floor. Her father held her hand. Her mother kissed her forehead like she used to when Hannah was small and storms scared her. Inside, the man wouldn't look at her. That hurt more than if he had. When she spoke, her voice wavered, but it didn't break. She didn't dramatize, didn't accuse. She just told the truth. What she saw, what she did, why she stayed. The courtroom went silent when she finished. The judge removed his glasses. "You did what many adults fail to do," he said quietly. "You acted." The sentence was long, final. No applause followed. Justice rarely sounds loud. Outside, reporters waited, cameras questioned. Hannah walked past them. Jack waited by the steps, not in leather, just denim and boots. He nodded once. That was all. Ethan's mother hugged Hannah so tightly it knocked the breath from her lungs. She whispered, "You gave me my son back." But Hannah shook her head. He was never gone. That night, Hannah sat on her bed and cried for the first time since it happened. Not from fear, but release. Courage had a cost, and she'd paid it. After Hannah, things changed. Parents didn't just teach kids stranger danger anymore. They taught them noticing, listening, trusting discomfort. Schools added programs. 4-H chapters updated safety training nationwide. Hannah was asked to help, quietly, carefully, without turning her into a symbol she didn't want to be. She agreed on one condition. "No hero posters," she said, "just skills." They listened. Ethan grew taller, louder, happier. He still clutched his inhaler, still checked exits, but he laughed more. Every year on the anniversary, Jack rode out alone at sunrise. Same road, same slow pace. He stopped at the quarry, shut off the engine, sat in silence. He always left a small green ribbon tied to a tree. Hannah never asked why. She didn't need to, because she understood something rare. Some moments divide life into before and the after is your responsibility. Years later, when people asked Hannah what made her brave, she always paused, because bravery wasn't a feeling. It was a decision made in fear. She'd grown taller, stronger, still kept journals, still noticed things others missed. She went on to study emergency response, not because of that day, but because of what it revealed. That staying matters. At Ethan's high school graduation, Hannah stood at the back. No one announced her, no spotlight. Ethan found her anyway. He hugged her tight and whispered, "You never left." She smiled. "Neither did you." Jack watched from a distance. Older now, slower, but peaceful. The engines were quieter these days. The world had shifted, and it all traced back to one moment when a girl could have walked away and didn't. Hannah didn't talk about that day unless someone asked the right way. Not the asterisk headline asterisk way, the human asterisk way. Years passed. New faces replaced old ones, but the lesson stayed with her like a scar you don't hide because it reminds you what you survived. In college, she volunteered nights at a youth crisis line. No scripts, no rushing, just listening. She learned that fear doesn't always sound like screaming. Sometimes it sounds like silence. One night, a caller whispered, "I don't think anyone would notice if I disappeared." Hannah closed her eyes. "I would," she said. She meant it. She always meant it. Back home, the town still told the story, but differently now, not as gossip, as guidance. Parents pointed to the quarry and said, "That's where someone stayed." Teachers said, "Notice the quiet kids." Coaches said, "Strength isn't size." Jack Price grew older, softer. He sold his bike eventually, but he kept the helmet. On the inside, taped beneath the padding, was a folded piece of paper Hannah had written years earlier. "I'm not leaving him." Whenever doubt crept in, Jack read it. Because courage, once witnessed, becomes a responsibility. And Hannah understood something else too. You don't save the world all at once. You save one moment, one child, one choice, and sometimes that's enough to change everything. The day Jack passed, the engines came back, not roaring, not fast, slow, respectful. They lined the road leading to the small country church. No patches on display, no statements, just presence. Hannah stood near the back, older now, steadier. She watched Ethan, no longer a boy, help his grandmother into a seat. He caught Hannah's eye and nodded, breathing easy. Jack's photo sat at the front, no leather, no bike, just a quiet smile. When the service ended, one engine turned over, then another, then many. A procession not of power but gratitude. They rode past the quarry, they rode past the school, they rode past the fairgrounds, and finally they stopped. Each rider removed a green ribbon from their pocket and tied it to a fence post, a tree branch, a sign, until green dotted the road like hope refusing to fade. Hannah felt tears come not from loss but from understanding. Jack hadn't been remembered for fear, he'd been remembered for learning, and for honoring the girl who taught him. Years from now, no one will remember the exact date. They won't remember the headlines or the numbers, but they'll remember the feeling, the quiet moment when someone chose to stay. Hannah still walks slow, still notices, still believes details save lives. Ethan still carries his inhaler, but he carries something else too. The knowledge that someone once stood between him and the dark. That knowledge shapes how he moves through the world. It shapes how he protects others. And somewhere in towns you'll never visit, kids are safer, not because of laws or power, but because one story was told the right way. About a girl who didn't run, about men who showed restraint instead of rage, about courage that didn't ask for permission. That's what remains, not the engines, not the fear, but the promise. Some stories remind us that courage isn't loud, it's present. If this story moved you,